Welcome to this week's episode of Trista's Plate Story Podcast. I'm Trista Polo from iwokeupawesome.com, and I am your host. Each week we learn the story behind that vanity plate. You know, the one you saw driving down the road? What did it say? What did it mean? Why did they choose it? This week we meet Sue Bowles. Her vanity plate, RAGMFFN, was the perfect choice to reflect her journey and the breakthroughs she has had in her own life. As a mental health advocate, Sue shares her journey and inspires others through her books, speaking, and website. We have an inspiring and thought-provoking conversation around faith and self-discovery. Let's meet Sue and hear the story behind her plate. Welcome everyone to Trista's Plate Story Podcast. I am here this week with Sue Bowles from Central Ohio. She and I found each other on a Facebook group, and her plate is RAGMFFN. Welcome to the show, Sue.
Thanks. Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited. So tell me a little about RAGMFFN. I think that's a really clever plate. Can you share the story behind it?
I would love to. I have to start first with explaining what a ragamuffin is. And it comes from a book by Brennan Manning called The Ragamuffin Gospel. And how I define ragamuffin is someone who's tired of wearing a mask and tired of trying to make people believe they're someone that they're not. It has to do with being authentic and authenticity and vulnerability. So that plate defines me now. And there's a whole story behind it, which I appreciate the opportunity to share that story. There is a retreat group that I became involved with back in 2014. There was a movie put out by the late Christian musician. It's about the late Christian musician, Rich Mullins. And the movie was called Ragamuffin. And because of that book, The Ragamuffin Gospel, was instrumental in Rich's life. And I was going through a lot of brokenness in my life at that point in time and was kind of feeling hopeless, to be honest. And it was a really tough watch to start with. And I watched it a number of times, and each time kind of felt a little more hope, a little more, hope is the only word for it. Later that fall, the people who made the movie, the family of Rich, and then his friends and the movie producer, were talking about doing a retreat to continue the discussion about the themes of the movie. And I attended that retreat, and that's where I started seeing a lot of breakthrough come through in my life. So the next year when it was time to get my plates, that was the only thing I could think of that really met my heart and was really my definition of what I wanted that plate to be, because it's a great conversation starter and it's a descriptor of me.
Now, you said something I want to peel back a layer of. You said that it's about taking off your mask, being more authentic. Can you share a little about what that means for you?
During the whole time this movie was coming out, I was going through a whole process of having to come to grips with my story. All of us have a story. And for me, I now speak as a mental health advocate because of my story, and just some of the layers behind that story and the masks I was wearing was I was coming to the point where I, right at that point in time, was really denying my story. I didn't like some of the parts of my story, and it had to do with the fact that I'm a childhood rape survivor. I grew up in a dysfunctional home with an alcoholic family. There was other sexual abuse when I was in high school. I've been suicidal twice. I have an eating disorder. So I'm in recovery from an eating disorder. So there's so much more to it besides that, having to deal with depression and anxiety. And there was a lot of that I was running from. I was in counseling. My counselor was working with me. I had never worked through that childhood rape. It happened when I was 7 in first grade. I didn't tell anybody till I was a senior in college, about 2 months before I graduated. It was a 15-year-old secret. So we were just getting into it at that point in time. And I was going through everything that a survivor goes through right after it happens. I was going through it was my fault. I should have known better. All those things. It's every doubt and question and self-loathing that is involved. And it is so misdirected. So I was still in denial about my story. And through the process of everything, I was having to deal with that hurt. I was having to deal with all the emotions that I had shut off. I became frozen in time in my emotions. My emotions when I was 7 years old. And that's what led to my eating disorder in college. That's what led to everything else. So when this movie came out and it talked about authenticity and masks, and it talked about living a reckless life and the reckless love of God, it was everything that I wanted, but I didn't feel I was qualified for. I called myself the holy exception, that everything was good for everybody else but me. I was too screwed up and I was too far gone. So when the movie came out and then the retreat happened and the subsequent retreats, I went through a whole process of having to own my story, first of all. And after that, I had to grieve my story. And then I had to realize that I was worthy. I had something of worth to offer the world, because up to that point in time, I was like, I was just taking up space. It was just hopeless. And then after coming to grips with all that, then starting to realize that I can now help others. It's about being my step ahead, being one step ahead. I have a website called My Step Ahead, and it's all about being a step ahead of the person behind you, so that as we grow and as we deal with our stories, we then have a responsibility to help the next person who's struggling.
I love that last part, especially because it's being responsible not only for your own development and breakthroughs, but for us as a society to grow and develop and have breakthroughs.
Exactly.
And that one step ahead, that really speaks to me, because I deal with my own self-worth issues that come from very old childhood crap that I've spent my whole life working through and facing and avoiding and being willing to deal with, and all the different layers that come with childhood trauma and childhood stuff. And a lot of mine has been about being worthy. It's very, I'm hearing a lot of myself in you. Like, who would ever want to listen to me? What possible contribution could I make to the world? And it took me a lot of work to get to a place where I felt worthy. But I think if I had heard the advice, if you're just one step ahead of someone else, you have something to offer of value. Even if you're not done with your journey yet, that's a huge and powerful message.
I think society in general thinks I have to arrive. I have to have it all figured out before I can have anything to offer. And that gets us to be a bunch of navel gazers, because we're always focused on our own lives and what I'm trying to fix. And we miss the world around us.
For sure.
We miss the opportunity to encourage somebody. We don't know what other people are going through. It gave me not only hope, it gave me purpose. It helped me realize that I have something to offer now, and I don't have to have it all figured out.
That's right.
Because I still don't. Even after all this time, I still don't.
Yeah.
But I know enough where I can help, somebody who's struggling, someone who needs a leg up, someone with whatever aspect of my story might resonate with somebody. I can draw on that, and at least that empathy helps me be with somebody. And sometimes the best thing you can do is absolutely nothing but just sit in silence. But I can understand that too.
Compassion, empathy. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, I'm curious if you have any thoughts. You have such, I don't want to minimize what you went through, but what I've learned is that you have a common tale. I'm sad to say. How many people are walking through life having never really dealt with secret shame from their childhood? It's a lot more than we realize, because nobody talks about it. And you walk around like you're all by yourself, and you are the only one that's ever had this happen. And so you better just keep your mouth shut. What advice do you have for somebody who thinks they might be ready to start to face what they've been through, so they can start to heal it and get through that process to the other side?
Great question. And when I speak, I share a story, so I'd like to share it real quick here. When I was at the point when my parents were divorcing and I was just hanging on by a thread, there were only two thoughts keeping me alive. And one of them was I was rational enough to realize my family didn't need to go to my funeral in the middle of the divorce. And I was involved in a sports camp out in Missouri called Kanakuk Sports Camp. They did a ski trip in the wintertime out in Colorado, and I went out on it. and a musician friend of mine that we lost touch with for a number of years. I met him through the camp. His fiancee had been killed on the way to surprise him at a concert. He's a Christian musician named Billy Sprague. He found out right before he went on stage that night. So he was neck deep in grief and just was suicidal as well. So that day, that trip, I looked at him and said, Billy, I need to learn from something you went through. And I said, how do you go on living when all you want to do is die? And we talked for almost an hour and a half. And we shared a lot of things, but what helped me most was his last thing. He looked at me and said, it's all I know to tell you, Sue, step by step. And what he was talking about is he had gone to the point of watching his shoes in the airports and thinking, one step closer, each step and one step closer. And when we were done talking, he had me watch my shoes, ski boots, going down to the ski slopes. And the first thought, my only thought at that point in time was, it is a long journey and I am not going to make it. That was 1991. And now we're at 2020 and I am still here and I'm kicking. So my advice to somebody is step by step. You don't have to have it all figured out. Billy was right, step by step. And that very first step is to reach out. If you're to the point where there's something inside you that's rumbling, and there's like a dissatisfaction to stay the same, pick up the phone, send an email, however you need to do to reach out. There's a lot of counselors, especially with coronavirus going on right now. A lot of people are doing virtual counseling, and it's actually getting accepted within insurance programs now. So it's neat to see insurance finally catching up to technology. But reach out. That is the best advice I can give anybody. I know it'll scare the bejeebies out of you. It'll scare your socks off, and you might feel like you have a scarlet letter tattooed to your forehead. When I first told my dean of students in college, I was walking back from his office to the student union, and I felt like everybody knew. And it was the most heart-wrenching feeling in the world. But at the same time, there was power in that, because suddenly the secret was out. Suddenly, it was like, okay, I don't know what lies ahead, and it's going to scare the daylights out of me, and I don't know if I want to go through this. But when I speak, one of the things I say is, and the only way to get through it and beyond it is to go through the mountain. It's not easy. It is painful. But you are worth it. You are worth every tear that is cried and every emotion that is felt, because that has been denied from you before now. And now you're starting to see that you do have worth.
You're absolutely right. One of the things that I say a lot in my coaching when I'm working with clients is the only way out is through.
Mm-hmm.
You can't avoid. So it's so important to be willing to face that. And what I will also say is you got to be ready. I often say that nobody can tell me how to grieve and nobody can tell me how to heal.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I had two dogs. They were best friends and they were my best friends. They were our kids. And they passed away on the same day. And it was terrible.
So sorry.
Yeah. And it still hurts, even though it was years ago.
Yeah.
And
gut-wrenching.
Yeah. And I can't tell you how many people started sending me dogs that needed adopted. Like, this'll fix it. This'll fix it. Get another dog. This'll fix it. I'm like, you don't understand. And it was then that I really got that you don't get to tell me how to grieve. And I don't get to tell you how to grieve. And the same thing goes with healing. We don't get to tell each other what we need or how to heal. Every moment that I spend healing my own past, healing my own spirit and heart, elevates healing to be available for other people.
Right.
Which I think allows other people to see it as possible. But we can't say, it's time, get out there, tell your secret, own your shame. You can't. You can't. They've got to be ready. They've got to be ready.
And if I can add real quick here, Trista.
Please.
Is that it's a process. And I used to hate that word. Process and progress were two of my most hated words. And now I relish them because I understand a little more. But yeah, I was in counseling for years. And then I went through a time period where it seemed like everything was okay. And I still had not really dealt with this. And then sometimes the most unexpected things can kick it. If there is something unresolved in your life, it's going to come out. It's going to find a way to leak. And for me, I lost a very dear friend in 2005, and it was 3 years after she passed. I was still grieving her like yesterday, and I was starting to see my eating disorder behaviors start kicking up. So I reached out to somebody, to my pastor. I reached out to, and told him, and he connected me with somebody that he had dealt with his daughters after their mom died. That's Amanda. I have been with Amanda since 2008. I am still with her now because we're still dealing with some stuff. Even after all this time, there's still a little more because it is continuing to evolve. And for me, I'm starting to realize that I can intellectually share my story, but there's still some emotional disconnect. And I'm working through the grieving process of what was stolen from me the day Bobby raped me. I had never done that before. And so that's kind of bringing up some uncomfortable stuff. But you're right. You cannot tell somebody, get over it. You should be over it by now. Or why are you still having issues with this? And the answer to that question is because it's my experience, not yours. And it ends right there.
Absolutely. And there's something else I want to underline that you said, which is about getting in communication. The mind is a very scary place to walk through alone.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, the lies we tell ourselves.
The lies we tell ourselves. Absolutely. And that's the perfect way to put it, because a lot of the stuff we tell ourselves is not true, especially the bad stuff. That's probably stuff you made up when you were having a really bad time, or when you believed something someone said to you that wasn't true. Because so many of us, especially if we've gone through childhood trauma, we're sort of dialed into what's wrong, what's bad about me. I termed it emotional cutting, where it's almost like you look for ways to create pain, emotional pain for yourself, because then at least you know you're alive.
Yeah, and it's all we've ever known. To suddenly not have pain, it's almost like, I don't know what to do with this. For the longest time, I thought this was something I dreamed of, but never thought was possible. I mean, if you had told me 5 years ago that I was going to go from dealing with the rape for the first time to speaking on podcasts and coming up here next month, a global mental health summit, sharing my story about having an eating disorder, I would laugh you out the door. No healing starts without reaching out. If you're sick, you reach out to your doctor. If you broke your toe, you're reaching out to your doctor. One of my biggest things and why I got into speaking is because I want to help break the stigma around mental health issues. There's nothing. It's okay to not be okay. I have a sweatshirt that says that. It's okay to not be okay. It really is, because odds are every other person around you wishes they had the courage that you're finding within yourself to say, I got something I need to work on, and I love myself enough to start working on it.
That is so true. I think the things we're most afraid to say out loud are the things that people are most inspired to hear, and they gain courage from your courage. Absolutely.
Yes.
And you have written a book, is that right?
Yes.
Tell us
I have
about
it
your
right
book.
Here. Can I show it to you?
Absolutely.
There it is.
Awesome. So tell me about your book. Did you self-publish?
Yes, I self-published.
I can tell, because look how proud you are that this book exists in the world.
Oh my gosh. I am so proud of that thing. The book is called This Much I Know, The Space Between. And the things I've shared briefly here about owning your story, grieving your story, coming to grips with the fact that you have worth are all what I explain more in there. But it basically talks about this much I know. I know my story. And these are the aspects of my story. It says, when we're talking about our stories, the space between is that gap, that time of questioning and anger and confusion and doubt and whatever else you can think of. It's the gray area of uncertainty, of wondering what the point is. I've walked that space between hurt and healing. It was fun writing it. It came out last September on Amazon. It's on Amazon and Kindle. This much I know, the space between is my baby, and it's so much fun to have it out.
I'm so proud of you, and I can see
Thanks.
You're very grateful that it's out, that it's not inside you, that it's out in the world.
Man. Yeah, it was one of those things that over time it just became a burden. It's like it became part of, I have something to share, and this is one way I can share it.
It's very powerful when you're willing to tell the truth. Now,
It'd
you
be
have
great.
something else big coming up, and you mentioned it a
Yes.
little bit. You're going to be in a summit. Tell us about that.
Yes. Yes. Well, yeah, I've said I'm in recovery from an eating disorder, and I speak and share about that because eating disorders have a bunch of stigma around them, and they have a bunch of misinformation around them. So, um, I am going to be part of it is with Life Mastery Institute, and it is a global mental health summit. It's should be coming out in May as part of Mental Health Awareness Month, and I share my story about an eating disorder called The Inside Life of an Eating Disorder. Because you were talking earlier about our self-talk, and when you start when your path starts off center, the further along you get, the further off center you are. So my self-talk was in the tank because of everything that happened, and then that led to an eating disorder, and then it continues to spiral down from there. So it just gets worse and worse and worse. Um, so I am really excited about that. If they want to text next step, all one word, next step, to 31996. Then send me your email address. I can send you the registration link. And it'd be a discounted registration link. And then I also have something called Hump Day Help. It's just something I send out via text on Wednesdays just to help encourage people, kind of, help them get them through the hump day to the rest of the week. So they can also sign up for that. Same thing, next step to 31996. And when they send me their email, I will send them two free chapters of my book as a thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very generous. Now, this summit, in addition to your talk, because we have a very varied
Mhm.
audience with this podcast,
Yes.
what
Sure.
else will people be able to learn from the summit?
Oh my, they've got, I think, about 30 different speakers. So you're going to have anything from life coaches and people sharing survivor stories like myself to counselors to I know some people are talking about sexual assault, sexual abuse, any aspect of mental health. It's a wide gamut, and it's an honor and a privilege to be part of it. It's an honor just to be able to help break that stigma. So
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, it sounds
yeah,
like quite a summit.
yeah,
And we are going to need support with our mental
uh,
health coming out
yeah.
of everything
Oh
that's been
yeah,
happening,
oh yeah,
all the
oh yeah.
distancing and the
Hmm.
working from home and the new dealing
Hmm.
with technology. And so we need
Yeah,
this mental health summit. We
yeah,
need it.
yeah. And more after it. And I think some of what we're going to see, and probably already seeing, while yes, there's a lot of return to the traditional family stuff, eating dinner at the table instead of, grabbing it through McDonald's drive-through or something like that. There's a lot of good stuff that comes from that. At the same time, I think there's some aspect of people are having to deal with their stuff. They're having to deal with face themselves. It's I'm not saying this is the case everywhere. I know for me, and I share about this when I talk about my eating disorder, is that for me it became if I kept busy, I didn't have to think, and if I didn't have to think, I didn't have to feel, and if I didn't have to feel, I didn't have to deal with my stuff. And right now, you take away the busy part, and people kind of have to start looking at themselves a little bit. So it's easy to be busy when you're always running somewhere. You don't have to think about. You don't have to come face to face with yourself. And right now, I think some people are having to kind of face themselves and might not be liking what they see, and maybe getting challenged to take that first step.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it is so key what you're saying that people are getting into a quiet space. And many people
Mm-hmm.
don't ever get quiet because they don't want to face
Yeah,
what's there waiting for them. So that's
yeah,
very astute what you've said.
mm-hmm.
That didn't occur to me, but it makes perfect sense now that you've said it out loud. You
Sure.
know, we're at home, it's quiet. Okay, what can I
Mm-hmm.
do? What can I do? What can I do?
Right.
And so this is a really perfect time to ask, who can I be?
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's going to be crazy. It is crazy already.
So let me ask you, what do you see down further in your journey? What's next for you?
I want to be a resource. I want to be a resource. Um, Over my right shoulder, you see a quote on the wall over there. It's not going to matter if you have a few scars. It'll matter if you didn't live.
That's great. Now, I really appreciate all that you shared today, Sue, and I would love
Yes.
to turn the tables because I've been keeping you on the hot seat and asking you all the questions. What's one question you'd like to ask me?
What are you learning right now?
That's a good one. So one thing I'm learning, so I'm part of a really challenging accountability group. I worked really hard to be part of it. It is with a very high level person in my company, and I'm learning tons. And it's making a huge difference.
Good.
And what I'm learning right this moment in the last, little while is that it's the one step ahead conversation. Actually, it's the perfect tie-in to what we were saying, because I'm now one step ahead in my training than the people I work with, coach, train, and partnered with in business. And I need to not wait until I understand the whole thing. I need to start training now what I've already learned instead of waiting until I've gotten it down pat. And I've been doing that some. I've been doing it some, but I've been waiting until I really got it before I really kick in the training in a big way, so that I can impart what I know now instead of waiting until I know it all.
Right. There you go. And if I can say, Trista, your eyes gleamed as you started telling me that. I can tell that energizes you and excites you.
It does.
And the smile on your face says it all, that you just like we were talking about, you're realizing right now that you have something to offer. You don't have to have it all figured out. You've got something to offer, and you're doing something with what you have.
Yes.
And that's all of us have. We have responsibility to do something with what we have while we continue to work to add more to it. And you're doing that. So good job. I'm proud of you. Great job.
Thank you so
Virtual
much.
high five.
High five. Awesome. I love it. So Sue, before we wrap up, is there any final thought or any final words you'd like to share?
Oh, wow. I just want to let whoever's listening and watching know that I believe in you. I think that's, everybody needs to hear that. Yeah, we may not have met. You might have just stumbled across this, but I believe in you. You have something to offer. You are on this earth for a purpose. And especially if you don't quite have that figured out yet, none of us ever have it fully figured out. It's a continual process. But I believe in you. You are here to make the world, your world, a better place right now. And I would challenge you to do whatever your next step is. And I would love to hear from you. Reach out. You can reach me on either my websites, either SueBowles.com or mystepahead.com. Text me your next step, 31996. I would love to hear from you. Maybe something we talked about here challenges you to take that first step. And if I'm the one that you want to trust with your story, that'd be a huge privilege. And I'd be honored to listen and walk with you. And then if I can help connect you with a local resource somewhere, I'd love to do that. My purpose is to help people in whatever form that can take, in whatever way I can do that. So if anyone would allow me that privilege, I'd be honored.
That's a beautiful note to end on. Giving back and contributing always. I love it. Sue, thanks so much for being on Trista's Plate Story podcast. I really enjoyed our time together.
Thanks for having me, Trista. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Trista's Plate Story podcast. Please subscribe to get the story behind all of those vanity plates driving with you on the road. And if you would like to nominate the owner of a license plate, including you, or visit any of our partners and sponsors, come see us at platestory.com. That's PL8STORY.com and give us the details. If you enjoyed this episode, please drop a review and give us a share. I'm Trista Polo, wishing you well on the road to your next adventure.